Good evening, good afternoon, good morning. This is John with 20's in the 20's, and we have the co-host Seth over there, and our special guest tonight, Alex Martin. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Tell us a little bit about you.
Sure. So I am from Wisconsin. I grew up in a small town with about 500 people.
What is the name of this town?
Minong.
Minong.
Yes, they're known for Jack Link's beef jerky, if you've ever heard of it.
Jack Link's beef jerky. Is that the hometown?
Correct. Headquarters is there and everything.
Ooh-wee. Mm-hmm. Okay. What else?
So I was in college for a couple of years in Eau Claire. It's about an hour and a half away from here on 94.
What'd you study?
I was doing journalism. Decided that the program at the college just wasn't for me, and then I decided to take a break for 3 years. Still not in college. Just trying to figure my life out at this point.
Long gap years.
It's okay, though. It's okay. I moved to Minnesota. So originally I moved to Minnesota with my ex-boyfriend.
Okay.
And I lived here for a month and a half. You know, switched my whole life around, left all my friends, left my job, transferred here. And about after a month and a half, he decided that he did not like Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
So I basically didn't have any other option except to move back to Eau Claire.
Okay.
And then that was just a very stressful structure for me. And then after a while, the relationship just didn't work out. I was pretty stressed out because I was living with him. I didn't know what to do. So one day I just had a panic attack. I decided to pack all of my things up, and my manager at Buffalo Wild Wings in Minnesota, where I had transferred originally when I lived here the first time, was like, I would love to have you back. Mm-hmm. So for about 2 months, I was working in Minnesota, but I still lived in Wisconsin. Mm. So that was very hard on me because it was a lot of gas, it was a lot of money, it was a lot of driving.
Were you still living with your boyfriend at the time?
I was. We were...
After you were broken up?
Yes, for about a month, I would say.
How was that?
It was stressful. I mean, he started seeing another girl at the time, so he wasn't home that often. Yeah, it was...
Awkward.
It was awkward. And, you know, the relationship, you know, I still wish him well, you know, I think he's a great guy, but unfortunately we just didn't really have as much in common as I thought at the time, mm-hmm. which is okay. You make relationships and sometimes they suffer, but it's okay.
What do you think was your biggest mistake with that relationship?
I believe that the biggest mistake I made was moving too quickly. Mm-hmm. You know, we had been seeing each other since September of 2018, kept talking, officially started dating in January of 2019. I moved in with him on the 1st of February.
So after about 5 months.
Yeah, and I think that was way too quick because you don't really start knowing a person until 3 or 4 months into a relationship. And at the time we were only seeing each other, we weren't even dating.
Oh. Why did you get involved in that situation, do you think?
I felt like it was sort of an escape from my situation because just dealing with living in a town where you're not comfortable with yourself and you feel like you're not making any progress, I wanted to run away.
Yeah.
And that's what I did. I literally told him, I'm like, hey, I'm done. I packed all my stuff up after about a month and a half. My mom brought it all home. I was talking to another guy at the time, and I was living with him in Minnesota. So I was basically homeless for a while because I didn't feel comfortable going back to what, you know, a toxic environment like Eau Claire was. And I just didn't feel like I was making any progress there. So moving back to Minnesota was my out.
Yeah. Do you think that's why you're talking to this guy in Minnesota?
Not 100%. Because he is a great guy, and we had a great relationship for the longest time, but I think there was a lot of self-care that needed to happen. And
For you or him?
For myself. I put no blame in anything on him the way that it ended because there was a lot of self-care that needed to happen for myself mentally and, you know, just structuring my lifestyle.
That makes a lot of sense. Mm-hmm. What do you feel like is the biggest issue in the world today?
I believe mental health is a huge issue, especially for America.
Why do you feel that way?
Because I feel like America is there's a lot of problems outside of like how our country is structured, especially with healthcare and all these specific things that contribute to people not being able to take care of themselves fully. Because, I mean, if you think about it, there's a lot of homeless people. You know, healthcare is a huge thing right now because it's so expensive and a lot of people can't afford it. So people can't get the help that they need.
Do you feel like there's no state-run programs to handle that?
I don't believe so, no, because a lot of times, well, because like even if you look at Obamacare, it's not even that great of a program. Because it's so expensive. My dad tried to get Obamacare, and he would have had to pay like $8,000 a year just to have it.
Wow.
Does Wisconsin not have any state-run programs for something like that?
They have Badger Care, but Badger Care's coverage isn't very good. From what I know, just from what my dad has told me.
I got Badger Care living in Wisconsin. You have to make under like a certain amount of money.
Yeah.
Is it a good program or no?
Every time I went to the doctors, I got free visits. Like one time I got 7 stitches and I got it for free.
Really?
But there's not, I mean, maybe you guys don't know this, but there doesn't seem to be a lot in terms of mental care, and
No, not at all.
it's more so immediate accidents,
Just immediate
stuff
help.
like that.
Yep.
What's your biggest regret in life?
I think my biggest regret in life is not getting the help I needed when I needed it. You know, not taking advice from my mom, the people that loved me around me, telling me that I was, you know, putting off a lot of toxic behaviors and not loving myself enough to take care of myself.
Why do you think you didn't listen?
Because I am a very impulsive person and I want to always think I'm right because I'm stubborn.
You want to be the winner.
Exactly.
How has that impacted your life versus if you think that you would have gotten the care that was recommended early on?
Sure. So it kind of started back in college. College kind of made me more depressed because I was moving from a town of 500 people to a college with 10,000 students. And it was just really hard to go from such a simple lifestyle to a very busy time of my life. Because, you know, being a full-time student, you're taking 16 credits. I mean, our campus was very spread out. We had a large hill that you'd have to walk up and down every day. And I'm just not a very active person. So that was definitely like an obstacle that I'd have to overcome to even go to class every morning. I kind of had a really toxic roommate at the time that was just very rude to me and wouldn't express how she felt.
Why do you feel like she was rude to you?
Because at times she wouldn't tell me how she was feeling. She'd be very passive aggressive about things and she'd text me versus confronting me in person. And that's not a good situation, especially when you're living with them, because you just need to try to make ends meet.
Do you feel like that's a big problem with our generation today, is lack of face-to-face communication?
1,000%.
Conversations?
Social media controls everything. You know, everyone feels so powerful when, you know, they can type a couple words behind a screen, but when you're actually face-to-face with the person, you have to look at their emotions and see how they're feeling.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people don't think about that.
So you talk about lack of physical exercise being a big inhibitor in your education.
Correct.
Do you think that big hill really was a big reason why you...
1,000%. 1,000%, because it was literally a 20-minute walk to class up and down that hill. So there were 2 ways you could get to campus. So I lived in Sutherland, which was on the far end of the hill, and then I'd have to walk to the hill, which alone was like a 7-minute walk.
Yeah.
So you could either walk down the hill, or you could take the staircase on the other side, and there's probably like 100 steps. And it was just exercise. Luckily, I never gained the freshman 15 like they always talk about.
That's fair.
Because you had to walk the hill.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But it was terrible. So a lot of times I'd take the bus, but the bus came at really random times. So sometimes I'd be getting to class like 2 hours early because I was too lazy to walk down the hill.
How long is this hill walk? How long does it take?
It's probably like a 4-minute walk. Walking up, it's probably like, I mean, sometimes I'd have to sit on the side of the hill just to, get air in my lungs again. But it was terrible. I think that's the main reason why I failed college, truly.
Didn't you play softball or something?
In high school, yeah.
Hmm.
I wanted to play in college, but I'm like, I already know that I procrastinate a lot. And if I add that on with my schoolwork, it's just not, it's not going to end well.
Do you think that your impulsivity bleeds into the procrastination factor?
1,000%. Because a lot of the time when I wasn't 100% focusing on myself, I was always looking for a good time versus being rational about my life.
Do you think that impulsivity came from nature or nurture?
I don't know, because my mom has never been a super impulsive person. My dad can be sometimes.
Yeah.
So I think it could be like a genetic thing in a way. In terms of, I think it's more of an environmental thing. When you surround yourself with certain people, you're going to kind of act like that. Like in college, I wasn't a drinker in high school. And then like second year of college, I started drinking a lot more. And then I felt more impulsive with the people I would surround myself with.
What was the switch flip for you?
Definitely, I think the idea of it's something new. I hadn't drank in high school much, so it was like a new fad. Everyone was drinking, everyone was doing this. I mean, why don't I join in on the fun? Even though that wasn't good for my mental health and it wasn't good for my goals and ambitions in life.
Why didn't you drink in high school?
I wasn't really a social butterfly in high school. I was kind of a loner. I read a lot of books.
Yeah.
At lunch, I didn't sit with like necessarily the outcasts, but people that weren't like your average person. And like you have to understand, in my high school, there was only one specific type of person if you wanted to have friends. You had to play sports. You had to be, super social and outgoing, and I just wasn't like that. So it was hard for me to find my, my space, my, like where I wanted to be.
Yeah.
So that was difficult for sure.
Seth, you grew up in kind of a small town. Would you say that's pretty accurate?
Absolutely, 100% accurate.
Yeah.
Yeah. Growing up in a small town, you really have to act one way, and the one way is going to get you in that town or out of that town.
I'd definitely say that it pushed me away, for sure.
So you didn't have a lot of social groups in high school, as either you were
No.
in or out?
Basically, yeah, because I grew up with 27 kids in my graduating class. Like, I didn't have a lot of options.
Yeah.
So everyone kind of acted one way.
Do you think it helps you being from a small town?
The thing that I always thought about when I was in a small town is I had so many goals and ambitions, because when you come from a town like mine, there's nothing there. So you basically have the world at your hands. You can go anywhere, you can do anything, and you've never experienced that before. Like, I wasn't really that fortunate as a child to be able to go on trips to, like, California or Florida, often at all. So I felt like I had so much to experience and so much to learn.
Do you think that's why you went through that quote-unquote rebellious stage when you moved to college?
100%. There was nowhere to go when I was in my small town. There was no one to, like, run away with. I was completely alone.
Do you feel like you found a lot of acceptance among people that were maybe foreign to you in that small town?
Yeah, I think so. Especially moving to a town, like, even like Eau Claire, for example, there's so many different types of people that have different interests. So it's like, it was easier to kind of connect with people that had similar things in common with myself.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't really huge into sports, and I didn't care about, like, my social status in high school because it wasn't important to me. So moving to a town, that has more of a variety of people, I was able to just, find real friends versus fake friends.
Yeah. Do Do you consider the people you partied with in college as real friends?
Absolutely not. I was excited about the idea, but not where I could actually see myself progressing with a friend group like that.
Do you think that social media gave you that image in your head?
Oh, 100%. You should see my Snapchat memories. It's so bad. It was me drinking like every weekend, sometimes during the week. I had a really close friend that just kind of turned me into more self-destructive behavior.
Do you think that stemmed from your desire to be liked?
100%. Because I had never been liked in high school. As much as I would have liked.
There's not a lot of variety of people in your high school.
Absolutely not.
So growing up in a small town, what was your family like? What was life like? How would you differentiate it from a bigger city?
Okay. So I grew up in an interesting household. So my parents got divorced when I was 7. My mom kind of was my main factor in my life. My dad, he was there. He was gone a lot because he was struggling with a lot of things mentally, I think, that he didn't realize. So it was kind of like the best of both worlds, Like I had my mom who was super there all the time, gave me everything that I needed. My dad, not as much.
Yeah.
But he was struggling with his own demons, and I could see that. Because, for a while we were living in a house, and we didn't have running water. I was living in a camper. There was one Christmas Eve I spent in a hotel.
Yeah.
So, that's pretty crazy. Moving to Minnesota has completely changed my lifestyle, and I'm not upset about it. Because Minong has a lot of, a different type of people, like more country. They like to hunt, fish. I even grew up on a lake. I lived with my grandparents for a while. But the people here, I feel like I can just connect with more because there's a lot of creativity that surrounds me with the friends that I've made.
Yeah.
And that really helps me become more motivated into where I want to be in life.
Yeah.
Compared to a small town to a big city, are people more materialistic in a bigger city?
Yeah, I would say so. People care about the cars they drive, what they wear to the mall. People in Minong just don't really care about that. It's not important. Like, everybody I went to high school with drove, like, jacked up trucks that they basically renovated themselves.
Yeah, that's definitely a small town vibe for sure. Excuse me. I feel like big cities come with a lot more pressure, but the visions and dreams are a lot wider.
Agreed. A lot about small towns is you have to, like, know people to even get a job. I worked at a dealership for a couple of years as a Saturday receptionist, and the only reason that I got that job was because my mom's boyfriend worked for the service part of it. And it helped me gain more connections even in, like, a bigger town.
Yeah. That's really interesting.
Do they see the bigger picture in a smaller town?
No. Not at all. I feel like the hopes and dreams of someone in a small town is just so lacking compared to, like, I feel like people just aren't as motivated. They're just so comfortable with their atmosphere, and that I couldn't do that growing up. I wanted bigger and better things. I wanted to venture out. I can promise you 50% of the people that went to my high school are still in that town and are not progressing to where they could be.
Yeah. I feel like it's a much smaller box.
It is. And there's not really a way to venture out of it
Yeah.
unless you have the ambition to do it.
Well, there's not a lot of hunger.
No. Everyone's fed so well by their environment. They're so comfortable.
Yeah.
And I'm just not, I don't like being comfortable. That makes me uncomfortable.
There's no challenge.
No.
How do you like Minneapolis versus where you grew up or even Eau Claire?
I think Minneapolis has given me a lot more opportunity, not only financially, but socially. I mean, even, like, the house that I'm renting right now was the nicest house I've ever lived in. The expectations here are just higher, and I like that. It's a challenge. It's a way for me to motivate myself to be better, and I just wasn't like that in Eau Claire. Eau Claire is it's Wisconsin. People love to drink there. And that's basically the atmosphere you're surrounding yourself with.
Yeah. What's the biggest struggle you faced in your life?
I think the biggest struggle that I've faced is probably transition. Because I kind of moved pretty rapidly. I was out of my town the minute I could leave Minong. And then when I got to Eau Claire, I was only there for 3 years. And then I'm changing my lifestyle again and moving to Minneapolis. And I was such a different person back then.
Mm-hmm.
And, mental health was a huge factor in it as well, because when I moved here, it's unstructured. So it just makes it a lot harder for you to, have that self-care at times.
Yeah.
But I will say that it has gotten better since I've moved here. I think it was the more positive choice for my life.
Do you think it's easier to slip through the cracks here in terms of being focused on for mental health and that sort of thing, or harder than Eau Claire or Minot?
I think it's a little bit easier because I can actually see myself progressing here. Even if I'm not necessarily doing it right now, I know that the opportunity will come to me.
Yeah. Have you sat down with a therapist?
Yes, so back in college, we had a resource on campus where we could speak with a therapist, and we had an on-campus clinic where originally I got diagnosed with antidepressants. And the therapist helped, but I didn't follow through with it like I should have.
Why do you think that is?
I think a huge factor was because I had been failing. It just put me in a really dark place. And I didn't utilize the resources that I had around me like I should have. Because I was so depressed I couldn't get out of bed. And I felt really alone, even though I surrounded myself with a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I never really had a place.
Do you feel like the influence from your friends has changed since you moved here?
It's been better. My roommates are a huge factor in how I've been treated, because in the past, all the roommates that I've had were, college students. So they were super not structured. They were making really rash decisions all the time. And, my roommates here have been really kind to me. They care about how I feel. And that's really important. And I've gained a lot of friends here that actually care about my well-being.
Looking back versus now, did you think that those friends were going to pass college and move on to something great?
At the time, I thought so. But truly, none of the friends that I had, it took them a while to realize what they wanted to do and where they wanted to go.
Mm-hmm. Where are those friends now in terms of moving forward with their lives?
A lot of them are still in school, which is good. It just took them a little bit longer.
Mm-hmm.
I think if I would have been involved in more of the activities that I found pleasure in, it would have been easier for me to get through college, because I was writing for the on-campus newspaper at the time, and that was the highlight of my life. I felt so important.
Yeah. Do you feel like your friends allowed you to crutch out of college? Like you leaned on them as a crutch and they made you feel like it was okay to keep living the path that you were on?
Yes. Especially because I wasn't putting myself first, I was putting them first.
Why do you think that is?
I was more excited about people giving me giving myself acceptance than accepting myself.
Why is that?
I think because of how I grew up, I didn't really have a place, and I felt a place when I was with people that enjoyed my company, and that's kind of it.
Where do you see yourself in 5 years?
I see myself in 5 years not where I am now. I see myself having a full-time job, being able to work more on my creative side, and just waking up at 9 a.m. every day with a healthy outlook and a goal and ambitions for the day. Like, oh, I need to wash the dishes today, or I need to do my laundry, and be more structured that way. Because I think structure is a huge factor in how you live your life. It's fine to be impulsive and have fun, but that can't be your daily objective.
Yeah.
Would you ever want to go back into journalism?
100%. You know, I switched degrees like 5 times in college and none of it felt right. But when I have a pen and a I have a pen and a pad in my hands and I'm listening to people's stories and I'm listening to them talk, I know that's what I meant to do.
I think that's fair.
I think it is too.
What do you want to journal about?
So, you know, I am creative, but I don't see myself doing. I like realism a lot, like more realistic pieces, and I like to listen to people talk. I like to ask questions, I like to know things. And I think that's a skill set that I could really use moving forward. I thought about starting a blog to kind of get myself out there again. But I thought about going back to school for journalism. It's so difficult right now with COVID, and I don't know if I could, you know, excel as much as I'd want to.
How has COVID affected you?
You know, actually, COVID hasn't been that bad for me because, so I was working at Buffalo Wild Wings part-time and also a job at a dealership. And so with Buffalo Wild Wings, they basically were like, you know, we're shut down. It's only takeout, because I was a bartender and a server at the time.
Yeah.
And then I was working part-time as a receptionist. And actually, I think it was a better way for me to realize that I can do more with my life than working at a restaurant. You know, like I have a lot more skills that I can use somewhere else. And I technically got a promotion at the dealership. I moved into a sales position for internet stuff, and that made me realize, like, they actually do appreciate my work ethic. And that not only, like, doubled my income, but made me feel like I had a purpose going into a job every single day. So it really didn't affect me as bad as it has affected some people, and I feel horrible for the people in the restaurant industry because they are even unemployed right now. But it actually moved me forward, because I would probably still be working that night receptionist job if it weren't for COVID.
That's really interesting. Do you feel like you do better when you're forced into situations where you need to, or when you can dream and, you know, attempt to accomplish that?
You know, I think it's a little bit of both, because when I was at the dealership, I didn't really have a choice, because my position was basically eliminated for like a month because they cut down the hours. So originally my schedule was like 3:30 to 8, Monday through Friday. And then when COVID happened, they closed the dealership at like 6 o'clock. So it was like, I could have been unemployed and gotten unemployment, but I decided to take the opportunity in front of me and just move forward with that. And it kind of pushed me, because I'd never been in sales before. And it was scary. The first 2 months, I didn't know what I was doing. I was so stressed out, but it pushed me forward to force myself to be better at what I was doing. And that was good. But also my hopes and dreams, it's kind of a slow process for me. But I think I need to learn how to do things step by step and just prioritizing what needs to go first.
What's the biggest thing you've learned in 2020?
The biggest thing that I've learned in 2020 is definitely to take care of yourself before you try to take care of other people.
Why is that?
Because there was a lot of things that I struggled with and I felt like I didn't know who I was. But then 2020 kind of forced me to like get myself in gear and just think about like where I want to see myself, because, you know, COVID is a huge thing right now, and it stresses a lot of people out, and it stressed me out to think about myself even more.
How do you feel about social media and being locked down and not being able to socialize?
You know, social media is a huge platform for people. I think that it's kind of gone upwards in a way because no one has anything else to do. But also, like, people are still, like, not following quarantine. They're still partying. They're still, hanging out with people. And they're kind of just, like, broadcasting that on the internet.
Yeah. How has social media affected your life personally?
I feel like social media is extremely unrealistic.
Why is that?
I mean, you see all these influencers on the internet just, like, living their lives, like, so great. And I feel like it's just a face. That's not who they are. Like, I feel like you don't see the behind the scenes stuff, and people want to be so much like the people on the internet, like influencers and Instagram and TikTok. Like, it can create kind of like an expectation out of yourself that isn't possible.
Yeah, I think that's more than fair. Mm-hmm. If you could go back and tell yourself one thing from 5 years ago.
Definitely to focus on my hopes and dreams. When I saw people graduating college with their degrees, specifically the people I went to school with, it was kind of like, it made me feel kind of bad about myself because I'm like, I could be there right now. I could have that degree. I could be working for a company right now, a media company, and I'm not. And that's actually what I wanted to do my whole life. When we were seniors in high school, we had to do this. We had a class called the Senior Exit Project, and basically we needed to have a class, or not a class, but like a project with 30 hours, and you had to focus on something that would help the community. So what I did was I wrote articles for our local newspaper about our school. So I wrote sports articles, event articles, anything that kind of was centered around Northwood, because that's the school I went to. And that kind of made me realize, like, this is what I want to do.
Why do you think you stopped following that dream? Is there any specific reason?
I think I was so unsure about myself that I just gave up.
You talked a little bit ago about living in a camper and staying in a hotel for Christmas. How has that affected your life? How has it changed your perception of things?
Sure. So it actually has made me a lot more thankful for the environment that I do live in now. I can take care of myself. I have a house. I pay my bills. Makes me realize that people struggle more than you think. And I never really let it affect my life too much because I knew that I had, a lot of people that supported me. And, my mom would have been there for me no matter what. But it definitely makes me more thankful for what I have.
Does that humble you?
Yes, it does. Because it makes me think about others a lot, about their situations and how I should be so thankful for everything I do have and everything that, I work for. Because a lot of people don't have the resources. Some people grew up in very unstructured households. Mine wasn't 100% like that, but it was still a factor that affected me as a child. But I don't let it weigh on me every day.
Do you still think you care about other people more than yourself?
I think I do, yes. Because I always put other people first, and I always give people the benefit of the doubt, when maybe I should be thinking about myself more.
If that flip-flopped, how would your life be different?
Honestly, I think I would... I'd be more caring about myself. I'd be more successful. I wouldn't let other people's ideas, kind of control what I do on a daily basis.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Are you working right now?
Actually, no, I'm not working currently.
Job transition?
Yes, and that's a huge stressor in my life right now. I mean, I haven't been in school for like 3 years, but I'm working towards getting my insurance certification out of the way And that's been a struggle because it's very time management oriented.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not the best with time management, and I'm a procrastinator.
How has being unemployed affected your life?
So, 2 months ago, I had triple the money saved in my bank account than I do now.
Mm-hmm.
And right now, my mom has had to help me out a lot with finances.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of like makes me realize you need to get yourself in gear. You need to get this done. And my mom kind of made me realize that too. Like, I need to be focused. And that's something I struggle with a lot.
What do you think about your mom?
My mom is my best friend. We didn't get along much in high school because we're both very stubborn.
Mm-hmm.
But now that I've grown older, she always used to tell me as a kid, like, you're gonna thank me for one day for everything that I'm telling you and everything I'm doing for you. And that's a very stubborn comment to say, but when I look back on it 5 years from now, I'm like, wow, like, she's right. 100%. Everything she told me, everything she did for me, like, it's everything that I needed to get here. She didn't always give me what I wanted, but she gave me what I needed and what was important to further myself.
How does that compare to your dad?
My dad, he's very impulsive. You know, I think sometimes he prioritizes certain things over what he should be doing. And he's a hard worker, you know, everybody loves him. He's a lot like me in a way where he'll put other people first. But sometimes it's a self-care thing for him. He, you know, sometimes I worry about what he does for himself because he doesn't take care of himself very well.
Do you think you're more like your mom or your dad?
You know, I think sometimes when it comes to my attitude, I'm a lot like my mom. But when it comes to, like, being procrastinating a lot and, you know, I am like my dad a little bit. And that's kind of scary to think about.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a sister?
I
Or
do,
brother?
yes. I have a
Sister?
sister.
Do you think she falls more into the same category or the opposite?
You know, when I was younger, I didn't think Abby and I had anything in common. But now that I'm older, we talk a lot more. And it's very emotional because, you know, I think back on my life and I'm like, you know, I could have had a really, really bad childhood. It wasn't horrible, but I still did struggle with a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
And I see that in my sister now. I see the pain she's going through, and that's why I try to be there for her, to explain to her, you know, like, you're upset right now, and that's totally plausible because I've been there too. And it worries me because she's still living in that town, and I just, you know.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Do you think your lack of self-care has opened you up to being taken advantage of more in your life?
Can we skip that question?
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, we're going pretty deep.
No, it's okay.
Being a journalist, do you have any questions that you want to ask me?
Yeah, actually.
Okay.
So how has the podcast affected your lifestyle so far?
I've really enjoyed it.
Have you?
I think it's so easy to get caught up in the moment, in the news of what's going on. And there's a lot of people that filter in and out of the friend group. But when I think about it, I don't really know people as well as I thought I did.
Yeah.
And I think it makes my relationship with these people a lot more human and beyond the surface level that I thought I knew them at.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Do you enjoy asking questions? Like, do you enjoy having these deep conversations?
Mm-hmm.
Is it something that you think influences your life and makes you more humble?
Absolutely. If I looked at myself a month ago, 2 months ago, even this summer, I think I lost touch with a portion of who I am as a person.
What part of yourself do you feel like has benefited the most? Emotionally, mentally, physically, structurally?
I think it brings a lot of context um, hearing about other people's stories and helping me realize that the world doesn't revolve around me.
Is it able to make you relate a little bit better to people that maybe necessarily don't have the same lifestyle as you?
Yeah, I believe so.
That's good.
It makes me a more understanding person overall, I'd say. It makes life just a little bit more relatable
Okay.
in the scheme of things.
That's great.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you see yourself with this podcast in a year, 2 years?
To me, it's more about documenting where we are as humanity. And the slogan on the website is "Face it, social media is fake." And if you only look at a person's social media, you really miss a lot of what makes them the person that they are. And it's like a highlight reel, and you don't really get to understand the true history. Like, I know social media is a format where we can document history, but it's a false dichotomy.
Agreed.
Yeah, it doesn't exist.
So do you think that people put their selves on social media for like affirmation, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I feel like this has been a very lonely year for a lot of people. And I feel like people feel a much greater need to fit in whatever way is possible. And they use social media as that tool because they don't have physical.
How do you think that affects their lives for the things that you don't see on the internet?
It's terrible. It's toxic. It's poison.
Do you think it's a mental health thing?
Yeah. I mean, when you talk about social media, people will always tell you that it's a way to keep in touch with family and friends that they don't talk to every day. But really, I feel like it turns into more of a keeping up with the Joneses kind of
I
lifestyle.
can see that.
Especially when you don't physically get to talk to someone. Which is why on my social media, I never really talk about what I've accomplished. I talk about what I'm working on, typically.
How do you think social media has changed in the 5 years?
I think in the beginning, it might have actually been a real way to keep up with your family and friends. But I feel like now it's just a desire to be loved.
Do you think that affects relationships outside of social media, like with
Absolutely.
family, friends, loved ones?
We're seeing a lot more insecurity. We're seeing a lot more depression. We're seeing a lot more realization of oneself.
Do you think people are becoming more out of tune with, the things they love to do, like their creative desires and their ambitions because of social media?
Not necessarily, but I feel like people, have these dreams and maybe they broadcast these dreams, but then they get a little validation and they move on because we're in the world of now where you can have everything at the tip of your fingertips. Like, I can go order dinner right now. I don't have to go upstairs and make it. I don't have to go to the grocery store. I don't have to drive there to pick it up. I can sit here and get anything I want at the tip of my fingertips.
Do you think your communication has changed drastically from, say, you send a text message to someone explaining how you feel versus in person?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that's different for you?
It's a lost art. Maybe not for myself, because I've always surrounded myself with people physically, but I do feel like, and this relates kind of to like Tinder and that sort of thing, it used to be a challenge to have these conversations with people, whereas now we can look at it and decide in 5 seconds whether it's worth it or not, versus face to face. Like, I'm staring at you now. You're reading my facial expressions. I'm reading yours. I'm talking to you. You're talking to me.
It's a real
Yeah.
connection. You know, we're connecting right now
Mm-hmm.
on things you wouldn't be able to do if you were over social media. I think that's why dating apps like Tinder, you know, it's just, I think people are just looking for validation. They want attention, like we were relating to before. And I feel like it skews real personal connections.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the conversation would be different. You know, and if I was on social media and I didn't like something you said and I didn't really know you, I could say something really hurtful and exit out of the conversation. And I would never feel bad because I didn't look at you in the face and tell you that. It was as simple as me just jotting out my thoughts, hitting send, and moving on.
Do you think that, say, like, you, like, state your opinion on the internet, do you think, like, the way you react to that would be different versus if you were to have a real conversation, like, almost like a debate on an opinionated
Absolutely.
aspect?
Because it feels like there's no consequences.
That's true. And I feel like almost you can just spit out words on the internet and you're not really thinking about, like, what the other person is thinking. It's all about you. But when I'm having a face-to-face interaction with you and we're speaking on, like, terms of, like, what I think and what you think, I think it's more of a respect thing. Because I can read your expressions and I can see what you're trying to portray to me, and I respect that.
When I'm focused on you, I'm not focused on myself and my thoughts.
Exactly.
And I think that's a completely different aspect. It's the same thing as texting someone, you know, the context isn't there because you're sending a word. And a physical conversation, there's 4 aspects behind that word. But a text message, there's no context.
So I know you were expressing to me about this book you were reading called Crucial Conversations. How has that changed your ideals on conversating with people in person?
It's taken a lot more out of the way that I feel and understanding the way that other people feel.
So it's less emotional for you and more trying to justify what the other person is saying?
Well, I feel like I've lacked empathy in the past, and trying to understand one's emotional behaviors in a conversation. And, excuse me, the book talks a lot about winning a conversation versus understanding it. And I feel like that helped me understand a lot about how winning might bring you instant self-gratification, but if you're actually winning, you're learning about someone, you're absorbing them, you're taking in the perspective, and you're growing versus telling someone your point and feeling happy that you were able to dictate it.
That's true. So I know you had spoken to me before about how the book victimizes or talks about how people will victimize others and villainize others.
Yeah.
What is your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that's just the culture that social media's brought. You know? It's really easy to take something out of context. Like there's this Bible verse in Matthew, you know, that talks about like kids stone your mothers or something like that. And if you just read that one verse, you're like, wow, that's really messed up. What could lead to that? But then you read the whole chapter and it's a completely different story. And I feel like too often people will isolate one aspect of the conversation and they'll broadcast that as the reason why they're right. But you're not hearing the full story. You're just justifying the one piece of evidence that you have versus taking the time to understand the situation completely and fully.
I like that a lot.
Thank you.
Do you think Crucial Conversations has helped you better with the podcast?
Absolutely. Brings a lot more to the human element. But, I mean, that's why I wanted to do this, because I want to understand where people are coming from. And I don't have to agree with them or disagree.
Exactly.
I just want to understand why we think the way that we do.
I think it helps relationships to become stronger.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because you can hold a grudge for as long as you want, but the conflict will never be resolved. And knowing how to talk about it and knowing how to put your feelings on the table and saying the right things and asking the right questions can make that problem go away, and then the stress isn't there anymore. And that doesn't
Yeah.
allude to your daily activities then.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of people are more focused on getting justification for their actions than learning why the problem originated in the first place and making sure that it's resolved.
Exactly.
And that doesn't create a healthy behavior pattern at all. It just leads to more tension and conflict.
It does, because then it'll continue to
Yeah.
be that way
Mhm.
for multiple relationships. And then at the end of the day, you're not really sure what anyone feels.
I think if you look at a relationship or 5 relationships, a larger sample size, and all you can come up with is reasons why the other person wasn't enough or that they were the bad person, you're really not taking a hard enough look at yourself.
No. You know what I've learned? So I have a really close friend of mine that I got in a really bad fight with. And you know, the entire time I was thinking about like why I was right in the situation. You know, why what I did wasn't wrong. But at the end of the day, it's not about what you did wasn't wrong. It's about how you made that person feel. So I had a good conversation with my roommate, and he kind of sat me down and made me realize, Alex, at the end of the day, the conflict doesn't matter. It's about your emotions and how you're feeling in the situation. And at the end of the day, I'm not necessarily apologizing for what I did. I'm apologizing for how I made that person feel. Because everyone's feelings are justified, you know? Even if the conversation was skewed or the action was skewed, my intentions were never poor, but I don't ever want to make someone feel that way.
Yeah, I think that's a big learning lesson I've struggled with in the past is, like if you look at a situation, and I'm like a very logical thinker where I'll try to separate emotions. It still happens, obviously, but I can look at a situation logically and say, well, this happened, this was the response, this is why it is what it is. But it doesn't matter what that outcome is. That is completely irrelevant when you're having a conversation with someone. It's you made them feel this way. They don't have to feel justified that you made them feel this way,
Exactly.
but they're feeling that way.
And that is what the problem is at the end of the
Yeah.
day.
The problem's not whether you ate half my sandwich and I called you out for it and now you're offended. The problem is that you're offended.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think that's a huge issue with today, you know? People are so eager to hop on, you know, the oh, you made me feel this way train when it's not about you at all.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Like, I'm going to bring a little bit of politics into this. It kind of reminds me of that Colin Kaepernick situation when he took that knee.
Correct, yeah.
You know, my initial response was, well, this guy's disrespecting the national flag or whatever. Looking back at it now, the problem isn't that he disrespected the national flag. It's that he felt a certain way, and people either aligned and said the national, like, America has flaws and it's bad, or people said, how could you disrespect the nation like that? But I feel like we completely missed the objective of the entire
100%.
thing. It's why does
It's
this
why he
guy
did it.
feel the need to take a knee on the field?
Yeah, it's not about what he's trying to do to the nation. It's what he's trying to do for himself and how he feels.
I feel like he wanted social justice.
Yeah.
See that?
Yeah. I don't know. I think that's really interesting. It was a dramatic way to go about it.
Colin Kaepernick has been compared to Martin Luther King.
I think that's a bold assumption.
I think
but,
that is bold.
But I think it's not without the same realm of what Martin Luther King was doing.
Same objective.
But I feel like the main difference is Martin Luther King took Martin Luther King, he took a very slow and rational approach. I don't think he did things that were polarizing necessarily, which I don't understand the full context of what it was like in the 60s. Maybe he did do things that were polarizing, but I feel like it was less, and maybe this is just the way that America is now. It was less polarizing, and it was more so about, here's an idea that I have, and I'm going to share it, and it gained traction because people wanted to hear that message. And I very sure people didn't want to hear that, obviously with the whole segregation in the South, and that was a big part of it. Was he was in the South, and they still had issues with drinking at the same water fountain at the time.
Isn't that crazy to think about now?
Yeah.
And now we're all about like human rights for every aspect, not just of color.
Do you think that we're moving to a place where we're so afraid to speak about what we find to be true?
Yes and no, because I feel like a lot of times people don't know what's right or wrong, because I feel like people do get offended easier than they used to in the past.
Yeah.
So it's like, where does the line actually have to be drawn in order for how I react to a situation or how I react to like a human right, Like, what do I say? How do I act? Where's the justification in that?
Mm-hmm. Do you think that cancel culture is toxic?
Extremely. I don't even know what it means. Why would you cancel somebody at all?
I think we're losing touch with America with cancel culture.
Well, everyone's so quick to cancel people, but then you look at your own demons. And it's like, why are you so quick to hop on this when, like...
Well, we're lacking the time to understand why they feel that way.
Exactly.
And a big part of America and why I feel like we're such a great country is because we can have these conversations. Like if I'm a white supremacist and I have a Nazi swastika on my arm, that's fine. We have freedom of speech. And we can talk to these people and try to understand why they feel that way and what drove them to that behavior pattern. And I feel like that doesn't exist inside a lot of modern developed countries.
No.
I think it's okay to challenge your beliefs with conversation. And you might not have to agree fully 100%. But the second that we stop listening to why people feel that way is the second that we really start shutting down and creating more divide.
I agree. I mean, look at the election. People are so quick to hop on Trump's, what he's done, how he acts. But, like, if you ever actually listen to what he said and what he believes in, everyone thinks he's against LGBTQ, and he's not. He's literally not. You can go back 15 years. Trump, I watched this speech where Trump's like, I'm all for men loving men, but that's just not going to be me.
But you voted for Biden, right?
Yes.
And that's fine.
It is fine, yeah.
Yeah, we're free to have our opinions in America. But I think that brings up a good point. I feel like people want to align so much with their belief that they're willing to beget the reality of other beliefs.
Exactly. Like, I feel like a lot of people nowadays don't even focus on the facts. They just create a story that's not necessarily true.
When there's a statistic that news that is fake spreads 6 times faster than news that is real, but it's because it's got a catchy title and it's polarizing and it aligns with people's beliefs.
Agreed, and that is so why I'm not in the journalism world anymore. Because I don't want my beliefs to be based upon one media company and what they want me to say.
I think that's the biggest problem I have with social media, especially Facebook, is the amount of stories that get shared. And I'm not aligning with one political belief or the other, but if I just go through my news feed, I could guarantee you if I fact check 50% of the stories, they're going to be wrong or skewed in some way.
Absolutely.
100%. I mean, there was already like one story about how like I think it was something about how like Wisconsin's ballots were like not deemed plausible because there were people like writing in on like the ballots themselves, like the poll workers, and it was deemed false. Like so quickly. Do you guys know what Snopes.com is?
Yeah.
That's a fact checker. I check it all the time.
But even at that point, some people argue that Snopes is biased in the way that they skew facts.
It could be.
Yeah. I don't know, that's the tough part. I mean, there's so much information out there that there's no, it comes back to the legislation issue. There's no guidance towards what is true and what is false. And there's no fact verification system on that.
There's not, and I think that's why the media is almost looked at like a joke in the eyes of not even Donald Trump, but a lot of the country.
Yeah.
Because, you know, we go to the news for the news, the facts. But that's not even the way it is anymore.
No.
Not at all.
No. And I mean, you could go to CNN and it's leaning, or you go to Fox News and it's right leaning.
I don't even think that should be a thing.
Yeah.
It shouldn't even be considered at all.
But people tune into them because that's what they want to hear.
And that's all the media is.
Yeah.
Tell you what you want to hear. That's how they make their money. That's how they get their views. And
Yeah.
that's why I've struggled with journalism so much. Because I don't want to be put in that box.
Yeah, I think that's what I like most about this podcast is it's a chance to sit down with people and hear their ideas and thoughts.
Without any
And-
criticizing or anything.
Yeah, and it's not skewed either way.
No. It's just
It's
how
just
they're
listening.
feeling. Yeah,
Yeah.
listening. Knowing, observing, asking questions to know more.
And that's the 20s and 20s, baby.
That is the 20s and the 20s.
20s in the 20s. Like, subscribe, and follow.
What's the biggest takeaway that my relationship with you as a friend has given you? Could be about yourself or anything else.
The biggest takeaway that I've gotten from having you in my life is definitely that you've given me every reason to love myself and motivate myself and know that I have all of the potential in the entire world to follow my dreams and be a better person.
Do you feel like that's lacking in society nowadays?
Yes.
Why do you think that is?
I think sometimes people don't have the self-worth to think that they can accomplish their dreams, because that's the biggest thing that I've struggled with. And I feel like everyone's just willing to settle. And that never used to be like that, like in the 1920s, the American dream, you know, that was such a great era for development. Like and now it just seems like people aren't, you know, a lot of people aren't finishing college. A lot of people aren't working jobs that satisfy their needs, you know, and it's kind of sad.
I really feel like politics in the past 20 years has grown into this justification system for both sides. You know, like Trump's whole message was China stole your jobs and China did this. Well, really it was you weren't ahead of the innovation curve and your job became obsolete because it was able to be outsourced, maybe, but it would have gone to another developing country that they can do that labor much cheaper, or it would have been automated if we didn't have that option.
I agree with that. I mean, we buy half our products from China already. Like,
Yeah.
we're not,
It's just cost of business.
it is.
It's a lot cheaper.
Exporting, importing, all that fun stuff.
But then you look at Denmark, where their minimum wage is $15 an hour, which is Biden's big speech, Bernie's big speech, and they just automated all those entry-level jobs and created, you know, we're in the era of AI, where these
Sure.
entry-level jobs are probably going to be obsolete anyways, and increasing minimum wage is just going to push that faster.
So, do you believe that increasing the minimum wage is going to make the cost of everything else go up? Like inflation?
No.
No?
And the reason why is because most of these jobs can be either outsourced or eliminated altogether.
That's
And
a fair point.
if it costs you $20,000 for a robot today, or you could pay someone $7.25 an hour,
That's
you're going to
true.
pay the person $7.25 an hour because they might do it 20% better. But if they cost twice as much, now that labor cost just doubled over the course of a year. And that's the difference between getting a robot to figure out and take 3 years to do that
Absolutely.
versus continuing your current path.
Do you think that our country doesn't humanize people enough when it comes to like corporations and sorry, that might be a weird question, but doesn't bring into play like people's lives? Because we always talk about like how we need to, take care of the homeless and take care of the people that aren't as structured. Do you think that we need to be able to, care more about the lower class?
Yeah, I had an interesting conversation with a colleague of mine about that. Basically, he thinks that a welfare network shouldn't exist because it's up to our communities to take care of each other. But I feel like with the way that technology is advancing, it's less of a community and more of a whole. Like you could have friends in different parts of the state, which is why I think there is a need to have a greater national safety net or even statewide safety net versus relying on local communities at this point, because a lot of people tap into communities like podcasts that are in Virginia or Las Vegas or California, and they're in Minnesota, and that's where they kind of align their beliefs, and they have that community there, but it's not in the same area geographically.
Okay, I agree with that.
Yeah.
I thought I had a question, but I don't.
That's all right.
That's
That
the first
happens to me a
time
lot.
that's happened this entire podcast.
That happens to me a lot when I'm doing podcasts. I come up with a good idea and then I lose it halfway through the conversation, and then I'm just brainstorming last second, full cylinders firing to come up with the next question. But I mean, it's part of the podcast process, and we're growing and we're learning, and
Definitely growing.
yeah. This has been very fun, Alex Martin.
Yeah, it has. I talk a lot.
That's all right.
Maybe that's a good thing.
That's your platform.
It's my platform.
That's the goal of this podcast, is to give everybody a platform.
Absolutely.
What's your favorite sandwich?
I like Cubans.
Cubans.
Yes.
What is on a Cuban sandwich?
It's like this certain kind of like mayo, and there's ham, and there's a different kind of it's so good. You need to try it. And when it's a warm sandwich, it's even better with the melted cheese. So good.
Do you prefer if the whole sandwich is grilled, or do you like toasted bread, or
I
what?
like toasted bread. It's so good.
Toasted bread. Do you like the meat and cheese to be melted as well?
Yes. It's so good.
Yummy.
Sound like a big Subway fan.
Sometimes. I mean, I had Subway yesterday, so maybe.
Well, this has been very fun. Thank you for joining us on the podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you for these exceptional questions.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for letting me ground you with some questions for once.
Yeah, that was really unexpected. But I'm really happy we had this conversation, and it helped me understand you better as a person and understand myself.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Have a good night, everybody. Thanks for joining us.